Chapter 1. Arrival on Zelara. Sergeant Derek Mason's pulse quickened as the exploratory vessel Vanguard made its final descent through Zelara's alien atmosphere. This was his first solo mission as a diplomat of sorts, even though his background was more in combat than in making first contact. The UEA, United Earth Alliance, had sent him to this distant world after receiving a mysterious signal, suggesting intelligent life, yet no humans had ever set foot on Zelara before. The mission brief had been vague, only stating that the planet was sparsely populated and possibly home to a peaceful, female-dominant species. As the vessel touched down on the soft, glowing soil, Derek ran a quick systems check. The landscape outside looked inviting. Lush, vibrant forests stretched endlessly in every direction, pulsating with hues of violet and emerald under an alien sun. He double-checked his gear. A standard-issue plasma rifle, an emergency communicator, a breathing apparatus just in case, and his combat suit. The latter, a sleek black material, fitted tightly to his body for maximum mobility. He felt a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. Alien worlds had a way of presenting the unexpected. He took a deep breath, letting the cool, floral-scented air of Zelara fill his lungs as he stepped out. The sound of the ship's engines faded into the background, and for a moment, there was only silence. Too much silence, in fact. The absence of fauna was unnerving. No birds, no insects, nothing to suggest any creatures roamed this alien wilderness. Still, his training kept him alert. "I'll scout for a bit," Derek said into his comm, transmitting back to the command center. His only immediate goal was to make peaceful contact with the planet's inhabitants, and his initial scans had detected a nearby village. Shouldering his rifle, more out of habit than necessity, he began the trek through the shimmering forest. The trees were massive, towering over him like ancient sentinels, their bark translucent and humming faintly with energy. The ground beneath his boots was soft, giving the sensation that it was alive, shifting with each step. As he ventured deeper into the wilderness, Derek felt the sensation of being watched. His combat instincts flared, but there was no visible threat, just a nagging feeling of eyes upon him. He paused, squinting into the dim light of the forest canopy, scanning for movement, and then he saw them, shadows flitting between the trees, figures moving with an unnatural grace. They were not hostile, but they were curious. He could feel their gaze fixed on him, studying him. "Show yourselves," Derek called out cautiously, lowering his rifle to show he meant no harm. At first, nothing happened. The shadows continued to move around him, blending with the trees. Then, a tall figure emerged, followed by another and another. They were female, tall, slender, and glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Their skin shimmered silver in the dappled sunlight, and their eyes glowed like distant stars. The sheer beauty of these beings momentarily took Derek's breath away, but it was their expressions, wide-eyed, almost innocent, that struck him most. They approached slowly, their movements fluid and graceful. One of them stepped closer, her silver hair flowing like water. Her eyes locked onto his with a mix of fascination and something else he couldn't quite decipher. It was as if she had never seen anything like him before, like she was observing a creature entirely new to her. "Human," the word came from her lips in a soft, melodic whisper. Her voice was like a song carried on the wind. Derek swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "I'm here in peace," he said slowly, lifting his hands to show he meant no harm. His mind raced, trying to recall any relevant phrases from the basic Zelaran language module he had been briefed on. But this encounter felt different, strange. None of his training had prepared him for this. The alien girl stepped even closer, her eyes studying him intently. She raised a hand and reached for his chest, her fingers brushing the fabric of his combat suit. Derek froze, his heart pounding. The alien woman seemed fascinated by his clothing, her fingers tracing the seams of his uniform, pulling gently at the material as if trying to understand it. Maybe we should," Derek began. But before he could finish, more of the alien girls gathered around him, their curiosity piqued. They whispered in their strange, musical language, their hands reaching for him, tugging at his sleeves, his vest, his gear. Derek's pulse raced as he tried to comprehend what was happening. They weren't hostile, but their curiosity was overwhelming. One of them pulled at the fabric of his sleeve, and with surprising strength, She tore the material slightly. A soft gasp of astonishment escaped her lips, and the others followed suit, their delicate hands pulling at the seams of his uniform. "Wait. Hold on," Derek protested, backing up as the situation spiraled out of control. But they continued, their laughter like wind chimes, their hands tearing at his clothes, fascinated by the texture and feel of the fabric. It was as if they had never seen anything like it before. The aliens surrounded him, and before Derek could stop them, they had pulled his shirt away, exposing his bare chest. The cool air hit his skin, and he shivered under their touch, their fingers exploring the strange new sight of a male. His mind raced. This was going south fast, and he needed to regain control of the situation. But how could he, when he was outnumbered, and their innocent curiosity was leading them into uncharted territory? Chapter 2. Their fascination grows. Derek stood amidst the alien girls, their strange glowing eyes fixed upon him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. His mind was racing, trying to understand the situation. Here he was, on an unknown planet, surrounded by a group of tall, silver-skinned alien women who seemed utterly fascinated with him, or more specifically, with the fact that he was a male. The sensation of their fingers brushing against his skin, tugging at his clothes, was making him increasingly uneasy. These were not hostile actions, but they were invasive, born from a curiosity that was bordering on obsession. One of the girls, the leader by all appearances, took another step closer. Her silver hair shimmered like moonlight as she reached out once more, her fingers hovering just above Derek's chest. He could feel the heat of her hand radiating against his skin. Her wide, glowing eyes were filled with both awe and confusion. "You are not like us," she whispered again, her voice melodic, as though trying to wrap her mind around the concept of a male. She seemed genuinely perplexed by his existence, as though she had never even conceived of a being like him before. Derek took a steadying breath, trying to keep his cool. "No," he replied slowly. "I'm not. I'm human. I'm a man." The word man seemed to confuse her even more. She tilted her head, and the other girls, now numbering at least a dozen, murmured among themselves in their alien language. Their words were soft and fluid, almost musical in tone. Derek could sense their collective curiosity growing, and it was becoming clear to him that whatever their understanding of biology or reproduction was, it did not include the concept of males. The leader's hand finally came to rest on Derek's bare chest, her touch delicate but inquisitive. She seemed fascinated by the warmth of his skin, as though she had never felt anything like it before. "You are warm," she said softly, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. Derek swallowed, feeling a mixture of anxiety and confusion. This was not the sort of encounter he had expected. He had been prepared for hostility, perhaps even combat, but not this. The way they touched him, the way they gazed at him, it was as though they were studying him like a rare and exotic creature. "We have no males here," the leader continued, her voice laced with intrigue. "We are born from the energy of our world. Our kind does not require your form." Derek's mind reeled at the revelation. This was a species that reproduced without males, without the need for any form of gendered biological reproduction. He had heard of species that reproduced asexually, but to see it in action, to realize that they had no concept of males at all, it was almost surreal. One of the other girls stepped closer, her eyes scanning Derek's exposed skin. She, too, reached out and placed her hand on his arm, her fingers brushing lightly across his bicep. "Your form is strange," she said, her voice just as soft and melodic as the leader's. "Strong, but fragile." Derek glanced down at her hand, feeling a twinge of discomfort. He had always thought of himself as strong. He was a soldier, after all. But to these alien women, he was something entirely different. He was an anomaly, something that didn't fit into their understanding of the universe. The leader seemed to sense his unease and withdrew her hand. "We do not mean to frighten you," she said, her tone softening. "We are simply curious." Derek nodded slowly, trying to process everything. "I get that," he said, his voice steadying a little. "But maybe we should slow down a bit." The leader tilted her head again, clearly not understanding his hesitation. "Why do you cover yourself?" she asked, her eyes flicking to the torn remnants of his uniform. "Your skin. It is beautiful. Yet you hide it." Derek took a step back, trying to put some distance between himself and the alien girls. Their innocent curiosity was beginning to feel more invasive by the second. Humans wear clothes, he explained carefully. It's part of our culture. We protect ourselves from the environment and, well, it's also considered polite in our society. The leader blinked, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. She seemed to be processing his words, but the concept of clothing of modesty was clearly foreign to her. There is no need for such things here, she said softly. We are one with our world. Our skin is our protection. Derek nodded, realizing that their physiology was vastly different from his own. They didn't seem to have the same vulnerability to the elements that humans did. Their smooth, silver skin seemed to shimmer with a faint energy, as if it was a natural defense against their environment. But still, the way they kept reaching for him, kept tugging at his clothes, was making him increasingly uncomfortable. One of the younger girls, her silver hair flowing like water, stepped forward and lightly touched Derek's arm again. She looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, filled with awe. You are different, she whispered. Your strength. It is not like ours. Derek swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. Yeah, I guess I am, he said, his voice a little strained. But that doesn't mean we should keep going like this. I need to get back to my ship. The leader stepped forward again, her expression softening. You wish to leave? Derek nodded. I've been here longer than I planned. My crew will be waiting for me. The alien girls exchanged glances, their murmurs growing softer. It was clear they didn't want him to leave, though they weren't sure how to express it. The leader's eyes flickered with something like disappointment, but she nodded slowly. Very well, she said. But, will you return? Derek hesitated. He wasn't sure how to answer. This encounter had been strange, to say the least, but it hadn't been hostile. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had only scratched the surface of understanding these beings. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe. The leader nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. We would like to know more about you, human. You are unlike anything we have seen before. Derek took another step back, eager to put some distance between himself and the group. Maybe next time, he said, trying to keep his tone light. But for now, I need to go. The leader nodded again, and with a soft word in her language, the other girls stepped back, giving Derek the space he needed. He quickly gathered what was left of his torn uniform and turned to leave. As he began to make his way back through the glowing forest, he could feel their eyes on him, watching him as he disappeared into the trees. Even as he walked away, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last he would see of them. The alien girls had been fascinated by him, by the mere fact that he existed as something so foreign to their understanding of life. And though he had managed to escape their grasp, he knew that their curiosity wasn't fully satisfied. As the trees closed in around him, their glowing leaves casting strange shadows on the path ahead, Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He had come to Zelara expecting a routine mission, but he had stumbled into something far more mysterious and far more dangerous. This was only the beginning. Chapter 3. The Pursuit of Knowledge. As Derek moved deeper into the shimmering forest, the weight of the encounter pressed down on him. His steps were quick, his breathing controlled, but inside, his thoughts were swirling in confusion. The alien girls had seemed so harmless, their fascination almost childlike. But the way they had touched him, examined him, and the leader's cryptic words had left an unsettling impression. There was something about the way they looked at him that felt incomplete. They had let him go, but it was clear that they still wanted something from him, something he couldn't yet understand. The path back to the vanguard was eerily quiet, the glowing trees casting long shadows that seemed to flicker and shift as he passed. Derek's hand hovered near his sidearm, though he doubted it would be of any use against beings who didn't seem to operate by conventional means. As a soldier, his instincts had always served him well when to fight, when to flee. But here, on Zelara, everything felt different. The usual rules didn't apply. After several minutes of navigating the dense, luminous foliage, Derek finally spotted the outline of the vanguard through the trees. Relief flooded him as the ship's metallic hull gleamed under the violet sky, its familiar shape a reassuring sight amidst the alien landscape. He quickened his pace, eager to return to the safety of his vessel, and put some distance between himself and the strange inhabitants of this world. As he approached the ship, Derek activated his wrist communicator, sending a signal to the command center inside. Vanguard, this is Sergeant Mason, approaching for re-entry. Prepare for departure. There was a moment of static before the familiar voice of the ship's AI, Zeta, crackled to life. Welcome back, Sergeant. Scans indicate no hostiles in the immediate vicinity. Please proceed to the docking ramp. Derek nodded, glancing over his shoulder one last time as he approached the ramp. The forest was still and silent, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Shaking off the sensation, he stepped inside the ship, the familiar hum of its systems greeting him like an old friend. He made his way to the cockpit, eager to check in with command and file his report. As he sat down in the pilot seat, Zeta's calm voice filled the cabin. Sergeant, I have detected unusual activity in the surrounding area. Would you like to review the scans? Derek frowned. Unusual how? Zeta's holographic interface flickered to life, displaying a series of energy readings from the forest. There appears to be a localized surge of energy emanating from the area where you encountered the natives. The source is unknown, but it does not appear to be hostile in nature. Derek leaned forward, studying the readings. The energy signature was unlike anything he had seen before. It pulsed rhythmically, almost as if the planet itself was alive, breathing. Can you isolate the source? He asked, his curiosity piqued despite the lingering unease from his encounter with the alien girls. I can attempt to triangulate the exact location, Zeta replied, the interface shifting as new data was processed. However, the energy field is unstable. It appears to be fluctuating in response to an external stimulus. Derek narrowed his eyes. Could it be the girls? Zeta paused for a moment, as if considering the possibility. It is likely that the natives are interacting with this energy field in ways we do not yet understand. Their physiology and connection to the planet suggest a symbiotic relationship with their environment. Derek sighed, leaning back in his seat. Of course it does, he muttered. This mission was becoming more complicated by the second. The girls had already displayed an unnatural connection to the world around them, and now it seemed that the planet itself was reacting to their presence, perhaps even to his presence. He glanced at the torn remains of his uniform, still feeling the ghost of their touch on his skin. The way they had surrounded him, their innocent curiosity quickly evolving into something more intense, had left him rattled. But even more unsettling was the fact that they had let him go so easily. It was almost as if they had been testing him, gauging his reactions. And then there were the leader's words. This is not the end. Derek couldn't help but feel that she had meant more than just a casual farewell. There was something in her eyes, something in the way she had spoken, that suggested she had plans for him, plans that extended far beyond this initial encounter. He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. Zeta, run a diagnostic on the ship's systems. I want to make sure everything's in order before we take off. Understood, Sergeant, Zeta replied, her voice smooth and efficient. Beginning diagnostic now. As the AI began its scan, Derek stood and made his way to the small cabin at the back of the ship. He needed to change out of his torn uniform and collect his thoughts. The encounter with the alien girls had left him feeling exposed both physically and mentally. He had trained for combat, for survival in hostile environments, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the disorienting blend of curiosity and intensity that the girls had displayed. As he stripped off the remains of his uniform and changed into a fresh set of clothes, his mind kept replaying the moment when the leader had touched his chest, her fingers lingering just a little too long. There had been something in her eyes, a hunger, a desire for knowledge that went beyond simple curiosity. She wanted to understand him, to know him in ways that made Derek uneasy. He had barely finished dressing when Zeta's voice echoed through the ship once more. Sergeant, there is a disturbance outside the ship. Derek froze, his pulse quickening. What kind of disturbance? The energy field in the surrounding area has intensified. I am detecting multiple life forms approaching the ship at a rapid pace. Derek's heart skipped a beat. How many? Approximately 12. Their biosignatures match those of the natives you encountered earlier. Derek's mind raced. The alien girls had followed him. But why? Hadn't they been satisfied with their initial encounter? What more could they want from him? Without a second thought, Derek grabbed his plasma rifle from its storage compartment and moved to the cockpit. The ship's external cameras displayed a live feed of the area surrounding the Vanguard, and sure enough, the alien girls were there. They moved gracefully through the trees, their silver skin glowing in the dim light. Their eyes were fixed on the ship, their expressions determined. "They're not letting me leave," Derek muttered under his breath. As the girls closed in on the ship, Derek realized that this was far from over. Their curiosity had turned into something more, a pursuit, a desire to understand him, to keep him close. And now, they were making it clear that they wouldn't let him go without getting the answers they sought. Derek gripped his rifle tightly, his mind racing as he tried to figure out his next move. The girls had seemed peaceful before, but now their determination was undeniable. What had started as an innocent exploration of their curiosity was quickly spiraling into something far more dangerous. He had to find a way out, and fast. Chapter 4. The Choice. Derek's grip on his plasma rifle tightened as the alien girls closed in on the Vanguard. Their graceful, ethereal movements were at odds with the intensity in their glowing eyes. They were determined far more so than during their initial encounter. Something had shifted. What was once innocent curiosity now carried a sense of urgency, a need to possess or understand something vital about him. His instincts screamed at him to prepare for a fight, but Derek hesitated. These weren't hostile creatures in the traditional sense. They hadn't attacked him or shown overt aggression. And yet, the fact that they were surrounding his ship, preventing his departure, made it clear that they weren't willing to let him leave. Their fascination with him was now verging on obsession. Zeta's calm voice echoed through the cockpit. "Sergeant, the natives appear to be gathering at the ship's perimeter. They are making no attempt to breach the hull, but their movements suggest coordination. I recommend immediate departure to avoid further escalation." Derek shook his head. "If I try to take off now, they might do something reckless. They could hurt themselves or damage the ship. I need to understand what they want." He glanced at the external monitor. The leader, the tall, silver-haired woman who had touched him earlier, was standing directly in front of the ship, her eyes locked onto the cockpit as if she could see him through the reinforced glass. Her expression was calm, almost serene, but there was no mistaking the intensity behind her gaze. "Zeta, open the external speakers," Derek ordered. "Let's see if I can talk to them." A moment later, the ship's communication system hummed to life, projecting Derek's voice out into the clearing. "What do you want?" he called out, trying to keep his tone steady. "Why are you blocking my ship?" The leader stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate. The other girls stayed behind her, their eyes fixed on the Vanguard. She raised her hand in a gesture of peace. "Human," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the still air. "We do not wish to harm you. We only seek to understand." Derek's brow furrowed. "Understand what? You already said I'm different. You've seen what you needed to see." The leader shook her head, her silver hair shimmering in the soft light. "You do not understand, human. Your presence here is not a mere coincidence. Our kind has existed for millennia, untouched by the presence of males. But your existence here is something we cannot ignore. You represent something new, something we must learn from." Derek's heart raced. "Learn what? I'm just a soldier. I'm not some scientific experiment for you to study." The leader's glowing eyes softened. "You are more than you realize. Your body, your strength, your very being, these are things we have never encountered. Our people have no males, no concept of the division between male and female. And yet, your presence here has awakened something within us, something we did not know we were missing." Derek swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if he liked where this conversation was going. "What are you saying?" The leader took another step forward, her gaze never leaving his. "We are not complete without you. The energy of this planet, the life force that sustains us, it is tied to us, and now it is tied to you. You are a part of us now, whether you wish it or not." Derek's breath caught in his throat. This was worse than he had imagined. These girls didn't just want to study him, they wanted to keep him. "I can't stay here," he said, his voice firmer now. "I have a mission. My people are waiting for me." The leader's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "We understand your desire to leave, but we cannot let you go. You are the key to something greater, something our world has been waiting for. Your departure would leave us incomplete once more." Derek's mind raced. He had to get out of here, But how? If he tried to take off, the girls might do something drastic, and he wasn't sure if his ship could handle their unknown energy manipulations. He needed another way, some way to convince them to let him go without causing a confrontation. Suddenly, an idea struck him. If the girls were so focused on understanding him, maybe he could use that to his advantage. He could give them what they wanted within reason and then leave on his own terms. Okay, Derek said, lowering his rifle slightly. I understand that you want to learn from me, but there's a limit to what I can offer. I can't stay here forever, and I can't give you everything you want. But I can show you more, explain more about my people, about myself. If I do that, will you let me go? The leader's eyes gleamed with curiosity, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she seemed to be considering his offer, weighing it carefully. The other girls behind her murmured softly, their glowing eyes flicking between Derek and their leader as they waited for her decision. Finally, the leader nodded slowly. If you will share your knowledge with us, we will allow you to leave when the time is right. But know this, human. The connection between us cannot be severed. Once you have shared yourself with us, you will always be a part of Zelara. Derek's chest tightened, but he forced himself to nod. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but for now, it didn't matter. The important thing was finding a way out of this situation without escalating it into something dangerous. Fine, he said. I'll answer your questions, but we do this on my terms. No more touching, no more tearing my clothes. If you want to learn, you ask. Understand? The leader nodded again, her eyes gleaming with approval. We agree to your terms, human. Come, let us begin. With that, the leader turned and beckoned for him to follow. Derek hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with uncertainty, but he knew he had little choice. This was the only way to ensure his safe departure. He took a deep breath, shouldered his plasma rifle, and stepped out of the ship. The next few hours passed in a blur as Derek sat with the alien girls in a clearing not far from the ship. They asked him questions innocent at first, about his world, his people, and the nature of gender and reproduction among humans. As he answered, he realized how deeply ingrained their need for understanding was. They weren't just curious, they were seeking something that their world had denied them for millennia. He kept his answers brief, careful not to reveal too much about humanity's weaknesses or vulnerabilities. He couldn't shake the feeling that, despite their peaceful demeanor, these girls represented a potential threat. If they ever fully understood human biology, they might use that knowledge in ways Derek couldn't predict. Finally, as the sun began to set over Zelara's violet horizon, the leader stood and approached him. You have given us much to think about, human. We will honor our agreement. You are free to leave. Derek felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you. The leader's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. But remember this, Derek Mason. The connection between us is not broken. Zelara has marked you, and you will always carry a part of us with you. Should you ever return, you will not be a stranger. Derek nodded, unsure of what to say. He turned and made his way back to the Vanguard, his mind spinning with everything that had transpired. He had escaped, but the encounter had left him shaken. The girl's words echoed in his mind as he entered the ship and prepared for takeoff. As the Vanguard lifted off into the night sky, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that Zelara wasn't finished with him yet.